I am 26 years old, and for the past year, I thought I was living a fairy tale. My fiancé, Mark, was everything I had ever dreamed of. He was handsome, successful, and treated me like I was the only person in the world. He planned incredible dates, bought me beautiful clothes, and always seemed to know exactly what I wanted before I did. There was a precision to his affection that I mistook for attentiveness. He would suggest a new hairstyle for me, and when I got it, he would look at me with such adoration, as if I had just unlocked a new level of beauty. He would pick out a dress for me to wear to a party, and the compliments I received would make me feel like he knew me better than I knew myself. I saw it all as romantic. I saw it as proof that we were perfectly in sync. His family loved me too. His mother, Eleanor, was a woman who radiated elegance and control. From our first meeting, she welcomed me with open arms. She would often touch my arm and say how I was the perfect match for her son. She said I had a classic grace that was so rare these days. She praised my quiet nature, my taste in literature, and my career choice as a librarian. It felt wonderful to be so accepted. She never spoke of Mark's past relationships, except to say in a dismissive tone that he had dated a few girls who were simply not up to his standard. She made it sound like I was the first real love of his life, and I believed her. It made our story feel even more special, more destined. Then there was his brother, David. David was different. While Mark and Eleanor were polished and bright, David was quiet and carried a subtle sadness in his eyes. He was polite to me, always, but there was a distance I could never quite bridge. He would watch me sometimes at family dinners, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. I tried to talk to him a few times, to draw him out, but he would just offer a small smile and a vague answer before finding a reason to leave the room. I figured he was just shy. Or perhaps he and Mark had some unspoken brotherly tension. I did not let it bother me. I was too wrapped up in the glow of my perfect life. The first crack in that perfect life appeared on a warm Saturday afternoon in July. The whole family was gathered at Mark and Eleanor's sprawling home for their annual summer barbecue. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and grilling meat. Music played softly from speakers hidden in the garden. I was helping Eleanor carry a tray of drinks out to the patio, feeling blissfully happy. Mark had his arm around my shoulders, pointing out a type of bird at the feeder to his uncle. I felt a tap on my other shoulder. It was David. He was holding a beer and his eyes seemed a little glassy. He had clearly been drinking more than usual. "Can I talk to you for a second?" he asked, his voice low. I looked at Mark, who gave me a reassuring squeeze. "Go ahead, honey. I'll save you a burger." I followed David to a quieter corner of the yard, near a large oak tree that shaded us from the afternoon sun. He took a long drink from his beer, not looking at me. I waited, a little confused. I could not imagine what he wanted to talk to me about so urgently. "I'm sorry if this is weird," he started, finally turning to face me. He looked deeply uncomfortable. "It's just, sometimes when I look at you, it's uncanny." I gave a nervous laugh. "Uncanny how?" I asked. He hesitated, then the words came out in a rush. "You remind me so much of his first fiancé." The words hung in the air between us. A cold feeling washed over me, a stark contrast to the summer heat. First fiancé. The phrase echoed in my head. Mark had told me very clearly that he had never been serious with anyone else. He told me he had never even come close to proposing before he met me. I must have looked as confused as I felt, because David's expression shifted from discomfort to alarm. "His first fiancé?" I repeated slowly. "Mark told me there was no one before me. Not seriously." David's face went pale. He seemed to sober up in an instant. "He told you that?" he whispered, his voice full of disbelief. "Wow. He really told you that." He looked over his shoulder as if afraid Mark or his mother might have heard. Then he looked back at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and something else I could not quite name. Guilt, maybe. He fumbled for the phone in his pocket. His hands were shaking slightly. "I shouldn't be doing this," he muttered to himself, more than to me. He swiped through his photos, his thumb moving frantically. He shouldn't have lied to you. My heart was pounding in my chest. 1,000 questions were swirling in my mind, but I could not seem to form a single one. I just stood there, frozen, waiting for him to show me whatever it was that had made him so agitated. He finally found the picture he was looking for and turned the screen towards me. Her name was Eliza, he said softly. And then he showed me the photo. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. The woman in the picture was not me, but she could have been. She had the same long, dark brown hair, styled in the exact same way I wore mine. A way Mark had suggested I try a few months ago, telling me it would frame my face perfectly. She had the same slender build, the same heart-shaped face. She was wearing a simple, elegant navy blue dress, a style I recognized instantly because Mark had bought me an identical one for my birthday. But it was the piece of jewelry around her neck that made the blood drain from my face. It was a delicate silver chain with a single, deep blue sapphire. It was the exact same necklace I was wearing at that very moment. Mark had given it to me on our first anniversary, telling me it was a family heirloom that his grandmother had worn. He said he wanted me to have it, to be a part of the family's story. Seeing it on this other woman, this ghost who looked like my reflection, felt like a violation. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put my hand on the tree trunk to steady myself. This was not a coincidence. This was not a simple resemblance. This was something else entirely. Something strange and deliberate. Who is she? I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. My own voice sounded foreign to me, thin and reedy. David quickly put his phone away, his face a mask of regret. "I'm so sorry," he said, shaking his head. "I shouldn't have said anything. It was a long time ago. It's not important." But it was important. It was the most important thing in the world right now. He had just detonated a bomb in the middle of my perfect life, and now he was trying to pretend it was just a firecracker. "David, tell me what happened to her," I insisted, my voice gaining a bit of strength. I needed to know. I had a right to know. He looked around nervously again. "It was a tragic accident," he said, his words clipped. "A car crash. It was awful. The family, we don't talk about it. It destroyed Mark for a while." He ran a hand through his hair, looking desperate to end the conversation. "Please, just forget I said anything. I've had too much to drink. It was a mistake." He turned and walked away quickly, melting back into the crowd of laughing guests on the patio, leaving me alone under the oak tree with the ghost of a woman named Eliza. The sapphire around my neck suddenly felt cold and heavy, like a stone pulling me down into dark water. The fairy tale was over. The music from the party sounded distant and mocking. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that my life was not what I thought it was. And I knew that Mark, the man I loved and trusted, had built our entire relationship on a foundation of lies. The question was why? And what was I going to do about it? I stood there for a few more minutes trying to compose myself. I took a few deep breaths, forcing the air into my tight lungs. I had to go back to the party. I had to pretend that everything was fine. I could not let Mark or Eleanor see that something was wrong. Not yet. I needed time to think, to process what I had just learned. I smoothed down my dress, the same style as Eliza's, and touched the necklace, the same one she had worn. A cold resolve began to form in my chest. I was not going to be a ghost. I was not going to be a replacement. I would find out the truth. When I rejoined the party, Mark smiled at me, completely oblivious. "There you are," he said, wrapping his arm around me again. "What did my brother want?" "Probably trying to get you to invest in one of his crazy schemes." I forced a smile. "Something like that," I said, my voice sounding surprisingly normal. "Nothing important." He kissed my temple. "Good, because the only important thing here is you." His words, which would have made me melt just an hour ago, now sounded hollow and sinister. I looked across the patio and saw David watching me. He gave me a small, apologetic shake of his head before looking away. He was a coward, but he had given me a gift. He had given me the truth, or at least the beginning of it, and I was going to follow it wherever it led. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I smiled, I made small talk, I laughed at jokes. But inside, I was a different person. The happy, trusting woman I had been that morning was gone. In her place was someone watchful, someone suspicious, someone with a mission. The fairy tale was dead. Now the investigation would begin. Later that night, after we had driven home and were getting ready for bed, I decided to test the waters. I had to see how he would react. I needed to know the nature of the lie I was dealing with. I waited until we were both in our bedroom, the soft light of the lamps creating an illusion of intimacy and peace. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching him as he took off his watch and placed it on the dresser. "Mark," I began, keeping my tone as casual as I could manage. "Your brother mentioned someone today. A woman named Eliza." I watched his reflection in the mirror. His movement stilled for a fraction of a second. It was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. A tightening in his shoulders, a slight pause before he turned to face me. He leaned against the dresser, crossing his arms. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes were cold. "David talks too much when he drinks," he said, his voice flat. It was a dismissal, not an explanation. "He said she was your fiancée," I continued, pushing gently. I kept my gaze steady, not wanting to seem accusatory. I just wanted information. He showed me a picture. She looked a lot like me. A flicker of anger crossed his face before it was replaced by a look of weary condescension. He sighed as if I were a child bringing him a silly problem. "Clara, she was no one important. It was a very long time ago, back in college. It was a youthful mistake and it ended badly. That's all." His words were smooth, practiced. He was trying to minimize it, to make me feel foolish for even asking. But his answer was a lie, and we both knew it. David had said it was a tragic accident, a car crash. Mark was making it sound like a simple breakup. The two stories did not match. "A mistake?" I pressed. "You were engaged. That seems serious." This is where his demeanor shifted. The mask of patience fell away, and the coldness in his eyes intensified. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice sharp now. "Are you feeling insecure? Is that it?" David puts one stupid idea in your head and suddenly you're questioning our entire relationship? He was turning it around on me. He was gaslighting me, making me the problem. He was making my valid question sound like a symptom of jealousy or instability. This was a tactic, a way to shut down the conversation and regain control. In that moment, I saw a side of him I had never seen before. It was manipulative and cruel. "I'm not insecure, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm just trying to understand why you would lie to me about something so significant." He walked over to the bed and sat down next to me. He took my hands in his. His touch, which was usually so comforting, now felt like a trap. "I didn't lie," he said, his voice softening, becoming gentle and persuasive again. "I just didn't want to burden you with a sad story from my past. It has nothing to do with us. You and I, what we have, it's completely separate. It's new. I didn't want to taint it with old ghosts." He squeezed my hands. "Can we please just drop this? It's upsetting to me, and I can see it's upsetting you. Let's not let my stupid brother ruin our evening." I knew he was lying. Every word was a carefully constructed piece of a larger deception, but I also knew that pushing him further right now would only make him build his walls higher. He had shown me his strategy: deny, minimize, and then attack my emotional state. Arguing would get me nowhere. I needed a different approach. I needed to pretend to accept his explanation while I gathered more information on my own. so I let out a slow breath and nodded. Okay, I said, letting a note of reluctance into my voice to make it believable. Okay, Mark, I'm sorry. You're right. It's just a surprise, that's all. His entire body seemed to relax. The charming, loving Mark was back instantly. He smiled, a brilliant, relieved smile that did not reach his eyes. Thank you, he said, leaning in to kiss me. I love you. Only you. I kissed him back. A hollow gesture that felt like a betrayal of myself. As his lips touched mine, all I could see was the face of the woman in the photograph. The woman who looked just like me. The woman he was pretending was not important. He wanted me to drop it. He wanted me to forget. But I would not. I would pretend to. I would play the part of the trusting fiancé. But in the quiet moments when he was not looking, I would be searching. I would find out everything there was to know about Eliza. And I would uncover the truth he was so desperate to keep buried. The lie he told me that night was not the end of the conversation. It was the beginning of my war. My first step was to try and find Eliza online. I waited until the next day, when Mark was at work and I had the house to myself. I sat at my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I felt like a detective in my own life. I typed her name, Eliza, into the search bar, but I did not know her last name. I tried different combinations, searching for Mark and Eliza, Mark's fiancée Eliza, but nothing came up. It was strange. For someone who was engaged to a man from a prominent local family, there was a surprising lack of information. It was as if she had been systematically erased from his online history. There were no tagged photos, no old posts mentioning her. Nothing. It was a digital dead end. This only strengthened my resolve. A clean slate like that is not natural. It is deliberate. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make her disappear. I decided to change my approach. David had mentioned a car crash. That would have been public record. I started searching for news articles about fatal car accidents in our city from around the time Mark would have been in college. I guessed he was about 5 or 6 years older than me, so I searched the archives from about 7 to 10 years ago. It was a grim task, scrolling through tragic stories, but I was determined. After an hour of searching, I found it. An article from a local newspaper dated 8 years prior. The headline was simple: Local woman dies in single vehicle accident. My heart pounded as I read the short article. Eliza Peterson, age 24, had died when her car went off a winding country road late on a Friday night. The police report cited high speed and wet road conditions as contributing factors. There was no mention of anyone else being involved. The article included a small, grainy photo of her, the kind from a driver's license or a student ID. Even in the poor quality image, the resemblance to me was undeniable. The article also mentioned she was survived by her parents and a sister. Sarah Peterson, a sister. This was a potential breakthrough. A sister would know things. A sister would not be part of the conspiracy of silence that Mark's family had created. I found a social media profile for a Sarah Peterson who lived in a nearby town. Her profile picture showed a woman who had the same eyes as Eliza from the news photo. I was almost certain it was her. But what could I possibly say? I could not just message her and say that my fiancé was her dead sister's ex, and he was turning me into a clone of her. She would think I was insane. I needed to be careful. For now, I put the idea of contacting her aside. I needed more information from my side of the fence first. I needed to talk to David again. This time, I would be more prepared. I would not let him get away with vague apologies. I waited a few days, letting the tension from the barbecue fade. Then I called him. "David, it's Clara," I said when he answered. "Oh, hey, Clara." He sounded nervous. "Listen, about the other day, I am so sorry. I was out of line." "It's okay," I said calmly. "But I'm not calling for an apology. I'm calling because I need you to be honest with me. Mark lied to me. He told me Eliza was just some college mistake. But I found the news article, David. I know she died." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. "You found the article?" he finally said, his voice quiet. "Yes," I confirmed. "And now I need you to tell me what really happened. Why is everyone lying about her? Why is Mark pretending she didn't matter?" He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "It's complicated, Clara. After she died, Mark, he wasn't the same. My mother decided the best way for him to heal was to never speak of it again, to just erase that chapter. She thought it was for the best, to protect him." "Protect him from what?" I asked. "From grief?" "You don't protect people from grief by pretending it never happened. That's not healthy." "I know," he admitted. "But you don't know my mother. Once she decides something, that's how it is. We all just went along with it. It was easier. Easier for them, maybe. But they had built a new life for Mark on a foundation of secrets. And now I was living in that house of lies." "David, I need to know more," I pleaded. "What was she like? Was she happy with him?" He was quiet for a moment. I could feel his hesitation, the internal battle he was fighting between family loyalty and his conscience. "She was vibrant," he said eventually, his voice tinged with sadness. "She was full of life, but I don't know if she was happy at the end. They argued a lot. My mother was always trying to guide her, give her advice on her clothes, her career, her friends. Eleanor said she was just trying to help Eliza fit into our family's world." The same words Eleanor used with me. The same guidance. Suddenly, all her compliments about my classic grace and my quiet nature felt less like praise and more like criteria I had met. I was not just a good match for Mark. I was a good match for the role of Eliza. "He is doing it again, David," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "He is turning me into her. The hair, the clothes, even this necklace he gave me. It was hers, wasn't it?" Another long pause. Then a whispered, "Yes." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was real. I was not imagining it. I was not being insecure. I was being methodically transformed into a dead woman. "You have to be careful, Clara," David said, his voice urgent now. "Mark loved her. He was obsessed with her. When she died, something in him broke. I think he's trying to get her back. Through you." His words confirmed my deepest fears. I was not a person to Mark. I was a project, a resurrection. The thought was sickening. After I hung up with David, I walked through the house that I shared with Mark, the house I had thought was our home. Now it felt like a museum dedicated to another woman, a stage set for a play where I was the understudy, forced to wear the original star's costumes and read her lines. I went into our closet and looked at the row of clothes. The classic dresses, the sensible cardigans, the elegant blouses. All things Mark had picked out. All things I had happily worn, thinking they were a reflection of his love for me. Now I saw them for what they were. A uniform. Eliza's uniform. I thought back to all the little suggestions he had made over the past year. The books he encouraged me to read, the movies he said we had to watch, the specific restaurants he took me to. Were all of those her favorites? Was I just reliving her life, step by step? A cold fury began to build inside me. This was not just about a lie. This was about my identity. He was trying to erase me, to overwrite my personality with the ghosts. I would not let that happen. My investigation was no longer just about finding out the truth. It was about taking my life back. And to do that, I needed to know everything about the woman he was trying to turn me into. I had to understand who Eliza Peterson really was. And I knew there was only one person left who could tell me the unvarnished truth. Her sister, Sarah. It was time to make contact. It was a huge risk, but it was one I had to take. Finding the courage to contact Sarah Peterson was one of the hardest things I had ever done. I sat with my finger hovering over the message button on her social media page for what felt like an hour. What if she thought I was a cruel prankster? What if she refused to talk to me? Worse, what if she told Mark and he found out I was digging into his past? The risks were enormous, but the alternative, living as a shadow in my own life, was unthinkable. I crafted the message carefully, making it sound as gentle and non-threatening as possible. I wrote, "Dear Sarah, my name is Clara. You don't know me, but I believe I knew your sister Eliza. Very briefly, a long time ago. I was so incredibly sorry to hear about what happened to her. I know this is a strange request, but I was wondering if I could talk to you about her sometime. I have some fond memories I would like to share, and I just wanted to reach out." It was a lie, of course. I had no memories to share, but it was a gentle lie. A lie designed to open a door without causing alarm. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. Then, I waited. The hours ticked by, and with every minute that passed without a response, my anxiety grew. I jumped every time my phone buzzed. I imagined all the worst-case scenarios. Finally, the next evening, a notification popped up. It was a reply from Sarah. My hands trembled as I opened it. Her message was short and cautious. "I don't remember Eliza mentioning a Clara. When did you know her?" I had to think fast. I couldn't get caught in a complicated lie. I decided to be vague. "It was through a university club years ago. We weren't close, so it's not surprising she wouldn't have mentioned me. I was just an acquaintance, but she made a real impression on me. She was so bright and full of life." I was using the words David had used to describe her. It felt manipulative, but necessary. I waited again. This time, the reply came more quickly. "Okay, I could meet you for coffee. When are you free?" A wave of relief washed over me. She had agreed. We set a time and place for the following week at a small, quiet coffee shop in her town, far enough away that there was no chance of running into anyone I knew. The days leading up to our meeting were filled with tension. I had to maintain the facade with Mark, pretending that everything was perfect. It was exhausting. Every loving word he said, every gentle touch, felt like a lie. I felt like an actor on a stage, playing a role I despised. But I knew I had to keep playing it until I had the full truth. The day of the meeting, I told Mark I was going to visit an old friend from college who was passing through town. It was an easy lie, and he accepted it without question. As I drove to the coffee shop, my heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I had no idea what I was going to say to her, how I would transition from my fabricated story to the real reason I was there. I saw her as soon as I walked in. She was sitting at a small table in the corner, and she looked so much like the photos of Eliza that it took my breath away. She had the same dark hair, though she wore hers in a shorter, more modern style. She had the same deep brown eyes. When she saw me, her eyes widened in shock. I saw a flash of pain and recognition on her face. In that instant, she saw the resemblance too. I knew then that I would not have to lie for much longer. I walked to her table. "Sarah?" I asked, my voice unsteady. She just stared at me for a moment, her expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. You look just like her," she whispered. It was not an accusation, just a statement of stunned fact. I sat down, my carefully constructed plan dissolving. The only path forward was the truth. "That's why I'm here, Sarah," I said softly. "My name is Clara, and I am engaged to Mark." Her face hardened instantly. The shock was replaced by a cold, protective anger. "What is this?" she asked, her voice low and sharp. "What kind of sick game is he playing now?" "It's not a game," I rushed to explain, leaning forward. At least I didn't know it was. He never told me about Eliza. I only found out by accident a few weeks ago. He lied to me, and his whole family has been lying to me. Sarah, he is trying to turn me into her. He has me wearing her clothes, her hairstyle. He even gave me her necklace. I instinctively touched the sapphire at my throat. I had deliberately worn it, hoping it would prove I was telling the truth. Her eyes dropped to the necklace, and a fresh wave of pain crossed her face. "That monster," she breathed. I can't believe he's doing this. After everything that happened. That's what I need you to tell me, I said, my voice pleading. I need you to tell me everything. The news said it was an accident, but his family is so secretive, it feels like there's more to the story. Was she happy with him? Please, I need to know the truth. Sarah was quiet for a long time, just staring into her coffee cup. I could see the internal struggle on her face. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with a deep, old sadness. No, she said, her voice heavy. She wasn't happy. Not at the end. She was trapped. And he, and especially his mother, they were the ones who built the cage. Over the next hour, Sarah told me a story that made my blood run cold. She described how Mark had been charming and wonderful at first, just like he had been with me. But slowly, over time, the control began. It started with small things. Suggestions about what she should wear, comments about her friends being too loud or immature, hints that her dream of being a graphic designer was not prestigious enough for the family she was marrying into. Eleanor was the worst, Sarah said, her voice bitter. She would do it all with a smile. She'd buy Eliza a whole new wardrobe, saying she just wanted her to look the part. She convinced her to quit her job at a small design firm to take a more suitable position as a gallery assistant at a place owned by one of their family friends. They isolated her piece by piece until he and his mother were her entire world. The parallels to my own experience were terrifying. The guidance, the gifts that were actually instructions, the subtle chipping away at my own identity. It was all the same playbook. Eliza tried to fight it at first, Sarah continued. But they were experts at making her feel guilty. They'd say they were only trying to help her, that they loved her and just wanted the best for her. They made her feel like she was ungrateful for questioning them. She started to doubt herself. She became quieter, more anxious. The vibrant, happy sister I knew started to disappear. I felt a profound sense of connection to this woman I had never met. I was living her life in reverse, and I was seeing where it was headed. Did she ever try to leave him? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She called me about a month before she died. She was crying. She said she couldn't do it anymore. She said she felt like she was suffocating, that she didn't even know who she was. She told me she was making a plan to leave him. She was saving money secretly. She was going to pack a bag and just drive away, start over somewhere new. This was the part of the story no one else knew. This was the truth that Mark and his family had buried. So the crash? I began, but I already knew the answer. She was leaving him that night, Sarah said, her voice breaking. That was her escape. She had called me that afternoon. She was so excited and scared. She said she was going to drive to my apartment. She was finally getting out. But she never made it. Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek. The police said she was driving too fast on a dangerous road. I think she was just so desperate to get away. She was driving towards her freedom. It wasn't an accident in the way they pretend. It was the tragic end of a desperate escape. The pieces all clicked into place. The secrecy, the lies, Mark's refusal to talk about her. It was not just about protecting him from grief. It was about protecting him from the truth. The truth that their control and their pressure had driven Eliza to a desperate act that cost her her life. They were not just grieving a lost love. They were hiding their role in her death. And now they had found me. A blank canvas on which they could repaint their masterpiece. A new girl, one who looked the part, who they could mold into the perfect, obedient version of Eliza that the real one had refused to become. They were not trying to bring her back. They were trying to get it right this time. Just when I thought the story could not get any darker, Sarah told me about the one piece of Eliza that they had never been able to control or erase. She kept a blog, Sarah said, a small, sad smile on her face. It was her one secret place. She started it after they got engaged. It was anonymous, a place for her to vent, to process what was happening to her. I was the only one who knew about it. After she died, I kept it active, as a memorial. I never took it down. My heart leaped. A blog. A written record of her thoughts, her feelings, her despair. This was it. This was the proof I needed. This was the weapon that could finally expose them. "Can you send me the link?" I asked, my voice filled with a new, steely resolve. Sarah nodded. "I'll send it to you right now." She pulled out her phone, and a few seconds later, my own phone buzzed. The link was there. "Be careful, Clara," Sarah warned me, her eyes full of genuine concern. "These people are dangerous. Not in a physical way, maybe, but they will destroy your spirit to get what they want. They did it to my sister. Don't let them do it to you." "I won't," I promised her, and I meant it. My fear was gone, replaced by a cold, righteous anger. I was not just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Eliza, too. For the voice they had tried so hard to silence. I thanked Sarah, promising to stay in touch, and left the coffee shop. As I walked to my car, I felt like a different person. I had walked in as a confused and frightened victim. I was walking out as an avenger. I had the truth. I had the motive. And now, thanks to Sarah, I had the evidence. I was going to burn their perfect world to the ground, and I was going to use Eliza's own words as the match. When I got home, I went straight to my laptop. I made sure the door to my small home office was closed. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the link Sarah had sent me. The blog was called The Gilded Cage. The title alone sent a shiver down my spine. The design was simple, mostly text on a plain background. The first post was from just after she and Mark had gotten engaged. It was hopeful, filled with excitement about her future. But as I scrolled down, reading post after post, I watched her hope slowly curdle into fear and then despair. I read about Eleanor's constant, cutting remarks disguised as helpful advice. My future mother-in-law told me today that my laugh is a little too loud for a formal dinner party. She said she would help me cultivate a more refined presence. In another post, she wrote, "Mark wants me to quit my job. He says he can support us both, and that my passion for art can be a hobby, not a career. He doesn't understand that it's not about the money. It's about having something that's mine." Post after post chronicled her slow erasure. She wrote about how Mark had surprised her by replacing all of her comfortable, quirky furniture with sleek, minimalist pieces that he and his mother had picked out. She wrote about how he started answering her phone for her, telling her friends she was busy when he simply did not want her to go out with them. I was reading a detailed blueprint of the life he was now building for me. Every controlling suggestion, every manipulative gesture he had made towards me was described in her words, years earlier. The most chilling part was reading about the necklace. "He gave me his grandmother's sapphire necklace today," she had written. "It's beautiful, but it feels so heavy. He said it's a symbol of me officially becoming part of the family. It feels more like a collar." I reached up and touched the cold stone at my own throat. I felt sick. I spent hours reading, absorbing every painful word. I felt Eliza's spirit in the room with me, a sad and angry ghost demanding justice. Finally, I reached the last post. It was dated the day before she died. The title was The Last Drive. My breath caught as I began to read. It was not a suicide note. It was a declaration of independence. "I'm finally doing it," she wrote. "I'm leaving. I have a bag packed and hidden in the trunk of my car. I have enough money to get a small apartment a few towns over. Tonight, after he falls asleep, I'm going to get in my car and drive. I'm not going to tell him where I'm going. I'm just going to disappear from his life. I know he will be angry. I know his mother will call me ungrateful and wicked, but I don't care anymore. I would rather be alone and be myself than stay here and be their perfect, silent doll. This is not the end. It's the beginning. I am so scared, but I am so ready to be free. This drive tonight is the first drive of my new life." Tears streamed down my face as I read her final, hopeful words. She had been so close to escaping. I saved the entire blog, taking screenshots of the most damning posts, especially the last one. This was my proof. This was the undeniable evidence that would shatter the family's carefully crafted narrative of a tragic accident and a grieving fiancé. It showed their culpability, their role in her desperate flight. My plan began to form, clear and sharp in my mind. I knew I could just pack my bags and leave, just like Eliza had tried to, but that felt incomplete. It would let them off the hook. They would just mourn their second lost doll and, in a few years, find another girl with the right look to start the process all over again. No, I could not just disappear. I had to confront them. I had to expose them. They had taken Eliza's voice and then her life. I was going to give her voice back, and I was going to do it in a way that would force them to listen. Their downfall would not be quiet or private. It would be public. It would be humiliating. And it would happen at the perfect venue, our engagement party. Eleanor had been planning it for weeks. It was to be a grand affair at their home, a formal announcement to all of their friends and family. It was meant to be the celebration of their ultimate success, the final step in cementing me as the new and improved Eliza. They had no idea it was going to be the stage for their ruin. In the 2 weeks leading up to the party, I lived a double life. To Mark and Eleanor, I was the perfect compliant fiancé. I went to dress fittings for the party, letting Eleanor pick a gown that was, of course, classic and elegant. I smiled and nodded during planning meetings, agreeing to all her suggestions for the menu and the music. I played my part so well that they were completely at ease. They thought they had won. They thought I was fully under their control. But in my private moments, I was preparing for war. I was in constant contact with Sarah, who was feeding me more details about Eliza's life, about her favorite music, her lost dreams. Sarah even agreed to be my secret weapon. She would come to the party. I told Eleanor that I wanted to invite my old friend from college, the one I had supposedly visited. Eleanor, so confident in her control, had agreed without a second thought. The night of the party arrived. I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom, looking at myself in the pale silver dress Eleanor had chosen. It was beautiful, but it felt like a costume. Mark came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You look perfect," he whispered, kissing my shoulder. "Absolutely perfect. Tonight is going to be a night to remember." "Oh, it will be," I said, meeting his eyes in the mirror. I gave him a small, enigmatic smile. "I promise you that." He had no idea how true those words were. I had one final touch to add to my preparations. I took off the sapphire necklace. I put it in my clutch bag. In its place, I put on a necklace of my own, a simple modern piece that I had owned long before I met Mark. It was a small act of defiance, but it was significant. Tonight, I was not going to be Eliza. I was going to be Clara. We arrived at his parents' house, and it was already full of people. The air was buzzing with conversation and laughter. Eleanor greeted us at the door, her eyes sweeping over me with approval until she noticed the necklace. I saw a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "Oh dear," she said, touching her own pearls. "You're not wearing the sapphire? It would have gone so perfectly with that dress." "I wanted to wear something of my own tonight," I said, my voice sweet but firm. "To feel like myself." She gave a tight, forced smile. "Of course, dear. How independent of you." She then turned her attention to greeting her guests, but I knew I had already unsettled her. Good. It was just the beginning. The party went on. I mingled. I smiled. I accepted congratulations from people who had no idea about the dark reality beneath the polished surface. I saw Sarah arrive. She gave me a small, nervous nod from across the room. Our eyes met, and we shared a moment of silent understanding. We were in this together. For Eliza. Finally, the moment came. Mark's father tapped a glass for attention, and the room fell quiet. He made a short, heartfelt speech about his son and the wonderful woman he was marrying. Then it was Eleanor's turn. She stood up, beaming, a picture of maternal pride. She gave a gushing speech, her voice dripping with fake sentiment. I have to say, she began, looking right at me, that from the moment Mark brought Clara home, I knew she was the one. She fits into our family so seamlessly, it's as if she was always meant to be here. She has the grace, the poise, the gentle spirit that I always hoped my son would find. I am not just gaining a daughter-in-law, I am gaining the daughter I never had. The room applauded politely. Eleanor looked at me, expecting me to be moved, to be grateful. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "Your turn, honey." This was it. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I looked out at the sea of expectant faces. Then, I turned my gaze to Mark and Eleanor. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Thank you, Eleanor," I began, my voice clear and strong. "Thank you all for coming. Mark is right. This will certainly be a night to remember." I paused, then continued. "I think it's time that everyone here knew the real story of our engagement, the story of how I came to fit into this family so seamlessly." I saw a flicker of confusion on Mark's face. Eleanor's smile tightened. I had their full attention. "You see, I was not the first woman that Mark chose to share his life with," I said, my voice ringing with clarity. "There was another, a woman he was engaged to before me, a woman he told me never existed." A murmur went through the crowd. I saw Mark's face pale. He started to stand up, a look of panic in his eyes. "Clara, what are you doing?" he hissed. "Sit down, you're making a scene." I ignored him, my eyes locked on Eleanor, who looked like she had seen a ghost. "Her name was Eliza Peterson," I announced to the room, "and the reason I fit in so perfectly is because I was chosen to be her replacement." I reached into my clutch bag and pulled out my phone. With a few taps, I connected it to the large, smart television that was mounted on the wall, the one Eleanor was so proud of. The first image that flashed onto the screen was the photo David had shown me. Eliza, looking like my twin, wearing the sapphire necklace. Gasps rippled through the room. People were turning to look at me, then back at the screen, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. "As you can see, the resemblance is uncanny," I said, my voice dripping with irony. But it was not enough to just look like her. I had to become her. I advanced the slideshow. A picture of me with the hairstyle Mark had suggested, next to a picture of Eliza with the same hair. A picture of me in the navy dress he had bought me, next to the picture of her in the identical one. Mark was on his feet now, his face white with fury. "Clara, stop this right now. You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I asked, turning to face him. "Or am I finally embarrassing you?" I turned back to the crowd. They tried to change everything about me. My clothes, my hobbies, my personality. They were trying to resurrect a woman they had driven to her death. Eleanor let out a strangled cry. "How dare you?" she shrieked, her elegant composure completely shattered. "You are desecrating her memory. She died in a tragic accident." "It was not an accident," I retorted, my voice rising with passion. "It was an escape. She was fleeing from you, from your control, from your constant criticism, from the cage you had built around her." I clicked to the next slide. It was a screenshot of Eliza's blog. I began to read her final post aloud, my voice filling the stunned silence of the room. "I'm finally doing it. I'm leaving. I would rather be alone and be myself than stay here and be their perfect silent doll. This drive tonight is the first drive of my new life." When I finished, the room was utterly silent. No one knew what to say. The polished facade of this perfect family had been ripped away, exposing the ugly, rotten truth beneath. Then a voice came from the back of the room. "She's right." Every head turned. Sarah was standing there, her face pale but resolute. She walked forward until she was standing beside me. "I'm Sarah Peterson. Eliza was my sister, and everything Clara is saying is true. My sister told me everything. You tormented her. You broke her spirit. You are the reason she is dead." The room erupted into chaos. People were whispering, staring at Mark and Eleanor with horrified expressions. Their friends, their business partners, their entire social circle were witnessing their public execution. Mark stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. He looked utterly broken, exposed for the monster he was. Eleanor had collapsed into her chair, her face in her hands, sobbing. But they were not tears of grief. They were tears of humiliation. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had done it. I had given Eliza her voice back. I reached into my clutch bag one last time and pulled out the sapphire necklace. I walked over to the table where Mark and Eleanor were sitting and placed it down in front of them. The stone glittered under the chandelier lights. "This was never mine," I said, my voice low and steady, for their ears only. And neither was I. Then I turned my back on them. I walked over to Sarah, took her hand, and together we walked out of that house, leaving the ruins of their lives behind us. The fresh night air had never felt so sweet. I was free. And this time, the escape was successful. The days that followed were a whirlwind of fallout. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from people who had been at the party. Some were offering support, others were just hungry for more gossip. I ignored most of them. The only call I answered was from David. He called me the morning after the party, his voice thick with a mixture of awe and apology. "Clara," he said, "I don't even know what to say. I am so sorry for everything. For my part in it, for not speaking up sooner. I was a coward." "You were in a difficult position, David," I said, and I meant it. I no longer felt any anger towards him. He had been a victim of his family's toxicity too, just in a different way. "That's no excuse," he replied. "But what you did last night, it was incredible. You blew the whole thing wide open. Our family is imploding. My mother hasn't come out of her room. My father is talking about separation. And Mark, I've never seen him like this. He's just gone, like a hollow shell." He paused. "You should know. People are talking. Everyone who was there is telling the story. Their reputation is ruined. Completely." "Good," I said simply. It was not about revenge, not really. It was about justice. It was about consequences. They had lived for so long without facing any. "I'm leaving, Clara," David continued, his voice sounding lighter, freer than I had ever heard it. "I'm moving out. I'm going to go traveling for a while, figure out who I am outside of this family. I wanted to thank you. You didn't just save yourself. You might have saved me too." We talked for a little longer, and I wished him well. I felt a sense of peace after our conversation. One life had been saved from the wreckage. That was something. My other important conversation was with Sarah. We met for coffee again a week later, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The tension was gone, replaced by a sense of shared victory and quiet grief. We were two women connected by a third, a ghost who we had finally laid to rest. "I can't thank you enough," Sarah said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "For years, I've carried so much anger and frustration. I knew what they did to her, but I could never prove it. No one would have believed me. You gave my sister a voice. You gave her justice. You let the world know she was not just a tragic victim, but a fighter." "She was the brave one," I said. "She was the one who tried to get out. I just finished what she started." We talked for hours, not just about Eliza, but about our own lives, our own dreams. We were no longer just allies in a secret war. We were becoming friends. In the process of uncovering Eliza's story, I had found a connection that felt real and honest. A stark contrast to the fabricated intimacy I had shared with Mark. I also heard about the continued fallout through the grapevine. A mutual acquaintance of mine and Mark's called me, hesitantly at first, to see how I was doing. She ended up telling me that Mark had been asked to take a leave of absence from his job at his father's firm. The scandal was too public, too damaging to their business image. Eleanor, once a queen of the local social scene, had become a recluse. No one would return her calls. Her charity committees had politely asked her to step down. They had built their entire world on a foundation of public image and reputation, and I had demolished it with a few well-chosen words and the truth. As for me, I moved on. I got a new apartment in a different part of the city. I packed up the few things that were truly mine from the house I had shared with Mark and left everything else behind. I did not want any of it. I did not want the clothes, the books, the furniture. They were all props from a life that was never mine. I went back to my job at the library, surrounded by stories. But now, my own story was the one that mattered most. It was a story of survival and reclamation. I started to rediscover myself. I cut my hair into a style I had always wanted to try, but had been told was not elegant enough. I bought clothes that were bright and colorful and made me happy. I reconnected with old friends who Mark had subtly pushed away. I started to feel like myself again, the real Clara, not the pale imitation I had been forced to become. I was healing. Months went by. The scandal faded into local legend, and my life returned to a new, better normal. I was happy, genuinely happy. Then, one day, a small package arrived at my new address. There was no return address on it. My heart beat a little faster as I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was the sapphire necklace. A small, folded note was tucked underneath it. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was from Mark. His handwriting was a frantic, almost illegible scrawl. There were only 4 words written on the paper. "You were almost perfect." A cold chill ran down my spine. Almost perfect. It was the most terrifying and pathetic thing I had ever read. Even after everything, after being publicly humiliated and losing everything he cared about, he still did not get it. He did not see me as a person he had wronged. He saw me as a project that had failed, a beautiful replica that had revealed a fatal flaw. He was not sorry for what he did. He was just sorry that I had not been compliant enough, that I had refused to be the perfect ghost. I looked at the necklace, the symbol of my gilded cage. For a moment, I was tempted to throw it against the wall, to smash it into 1,000 pieces. But that felt too dramatic, too emotional. It would be giving it, and him, too much power. Instead, I walked calmly to the kitchen, opened the trash can, and dropped it inside. It landed with a soft, unsatisfying clink amongst the coffee grounds and vegetable peels. That's all it was. Garbage. I never heard from Mark or his family again. I heard through Sarah that he eventually moved away, unable to face the disgrace he had brought upon himself. Eleanor and his father eventually divorced. Their perfect family was shattered forever. Sometimes I think about Eliza. I hope that somewhere her spirit is at peace, knowing that her story was finally told. I am no longer haunted by her. I am inspired by her. She fought for her freedom, and in a way, she won. Her words, her spirit, they were the things that set me free. They tried to make me a ghost, a silent stand-in for a life that was not mine. But they failed. They learned that you cannot erase a person. You cannot control a soul that wants to be free. They learned what it feels like to have their perfect world crumble into dust. And I learned that the most beautiful thing in the world is not a fairy tale. It is the simple, powerful, and undeniable truth of being yourself.